Aiden Farrow was the kind of son every mother dreamed of: quiet, polite, and brilliant. But when a string of brutal murders shook their peaceful town, his mother, Linda, would uncover a chilling truth hidden beneath her own roof. What she found behind a basement door shattered her world and revealed that the boy she raised was not just a loner, but a ghostly predator the world would come to fear as the Hollow Man. Linda Farrow had always believed she was doing everything right. Raising Aiden alone after her husband's sudden death had never been easy, but she poured her life into motherhood. From the time he was a toddler, Aiden seemed different from other children: quiet but highly observant, emotionally reserved yet intellectually sharp. Teachers often said he was mature beyond his years. He never cried in public, never threw tantrums. He read books far above his grade level and aced every test without much effort. By the time he turned 17, Aiden had become the kind of son every parent wished for: disciplined, polite, and fiercely independent. Their neighbors often commented on how respectful he was. He volunteered at the local library, walked elderly neighbors' dogs, and kept his head down. He never caused trouble, never got into fights. He didn't party, didn't drink, didn't even seem interested in dating. Linda, grateful for the peace and stability he brought into her life, didn't question it. She assumed he was just focused on his future, especially with college applications on the horizon. When the local news began reporting a string of bizarre murders around the city, families slain inside their homes with no forced entry, Linda was horrified, like everyone else. The killer left no fingerprints, no DNA, and took nothing from the homes. It was senseless violence, and worse, no suspect had emerged. The killer became a local legend of sorts, with media dubbing him the Hollow Man for his ghost-like ability to vanish after each crime. Sketches circulated but led nowhere. Police set up tip lines and checkpoints, but they were chasing smoke. Linda watched the reports each night, feeling the same fear gripping the rest of the city. She checked the locks before bed and kept her phone close. The victims seemed random: different ages, backgrounds, and neighborhoods. It felt like no one was safe. Despite the growing panic, her life with Aiden continued unchanged. He stayed up late in his room studying or writing, always with the door closed. She assumed he needed space and didn't push. After all, he was responsible and smart. She had no reason to doubt him. What Linda didn't realize, what she couldn't have imagined, was that the monster everyone feared wasn't a stranger lurking in the shadows. He was sleeping just down the hall. It started with a leak in the basement. Linda had been cleaning the kitchen when she noticed a damp patch spreading across the floor near the pantry wall. At first, she assumed it was a plumbing issue and rushed downstairs to shut off the main valve. As she stepped into the basement, the smell of mildew and dust filled her nose. She followed the sound of dripping water, her flashlight casting long shadows against the concrete walls. That's when she noticed something strange. The shelving unit by the far wall had been moved slightly, leaving deep scrape marks on the floor beneath it. Curious and confused, Linda tugged at the edge of the shelf. It was heavier than expected, but she managed to shift it aside. Behind it, a narrow wooden door stood out from the concrete, something she had never seen before. The door didn't match the rest of the basement. It looked hastily built, newer wood bolted onto the frame, almost like someone had wanted it to blend in, but hadn't done a great job. Her heart began to race. She'd lived in the house for over 10 years. She knew every inch except this. She hesitated before opening it. The handle was cold. When the door finally creaked open, she found herself staring into a small, windowless room that couldn't have been more than 10 feet wide. The walls were lined with soundproofing foam. A folding table sat in the center, scattered with photographs, newspaper clippings, and printed documents. Red string connected some of them on a corkboard, like something out of a detective movie. But this wasn't a game. There were photos of the murder scenes from the news, some she didn't recognize, with angles never shown on television. Victim names, handwritten notes, times and dates, all meticulously cataloged. The walls were filled with maps marked in permanent ink, showing routes and escape paths. Her eyes landed on a black leather-bound notebook lying open on the table. She picked it up. Inside were pages and pages of writing in neat, blocky letters. Each entry described a killing in chilling, clinical detail. He noted the time of day, the placement of bodies, how he entered, and how long it took to finish. It was Aiden's handwriting. There was no mistaking it. Linda's breath caught in her throat as she backed out of the room, her legs trembling. Upstairs, she heard the front door creak open. Aiden was home. Linda knew she had to stay calm. Her heart pounded as Aiden's footsteps echoed faintly above her. She quietly closed the hidden door, pushed the shelving unit back into place, and forced herself to walk upstairs as if nothing had happened. Her face was pale, but she managed a forced smile when she saw him in the kitchen. He greeted her like he always did, polite, relaxed, nothing out of the ordinary. He didn't know she had been in the basement. He couldn't. That thought kept her steady through the rest of the evening. That night, while Aiden slept, Linda barely blinked. She sat in the living room with the notebook on her lap, rereading the pages. She couldn't accept it, not fully. Maybe it was fiction, some twisted writing project, but each entry lined up too well with the murders. The details were precise down to what victims were wearing, the order of events, even what sounds were made during each killing. It was no story. It was real. By morning, her decision was made. She put the notebook in her purse, drove across town to the police department, and asked to speak with someone in homicide. The moment the detectives read a few passages, they knew it was authentic. Her hands trembled as she gave them Aiden's full name, date of birth, and address. It was the worst moment of her life, betraying her own son, but she couldn't let him hurt anyone else. The police moved quickly. Within hours, unmarked cars surrounded the Farrow home. Officers in plain clothes approached the door, but when they entered, the house was quiet. Aiden was gone. His room was spotless, bed made, drawers emptied. The maps, notes, and evidence in the basement had vanished. The hidden room was completely stripped, as if it had never existed. Even the foam on the walls was gone. Only the faint scrape marks on the floor hinted it had ever been there. Surveillance footage from nearby homes showed Aiden leaving just before sunrise, wearing a hoodie and carrying a backpack. He looked calm, almost casual. There was no trace of where he went, no credit card use, no phone activity. It was like he had prepared for this moment. Linda stared at the footage in disbelief. Somehow, her son had disappeared into thin air, exactly like the killer he had become. 6 months passed, and the silence became heavier with each day. Linda withdrew from the world, unable to face neighbors or return to work. The media attention had faded, but the whispers never stopped. Every so often, someone would recognize her at the grocery store, eyes widening in disbelief. Some pitied her, others blamed her, but none of them knew what it was like to question every memory, every moment, wondering how she could have missed the truth. Then the killings resumed. It began with a news alert from Seattle: a couple found dead in their home, no signs of forced entry, no evidence left behind. The story barely made national headlines until a detective in Richmond who had worked on the earlier murders noticed the similarities. He reached out to Seattle authorities, and the connection was undeniable. The method was identical, the same clinical precision, the same eerie absence of clues. Soon after, a second crime occurred, this time in Portland, then another in San Francisco. Each one bore the mark of the hollow man: clean, calculated, and devastating. The FBI expanded the manhunt, releasing new sketches, but none matched perfectly. Aiden had changed his appearance. Witnesses described a young man with darkened hair, sometimes wearing glasses, always quiet and distant. He left behind no electronics, used only cash, and stayed in cheap motels under fake names. The trail was cold, but the pattern was alive. For Linda, every new murder was another wound. She followed the news obsessively, trying to find meaning, some indication that her son could be caught or would stop. But each time, it felt like he was sending a message not to law enforcement, but to her. The randomness of the victims seemed intentional, as if to prove there was no motive anyone could predict, just chaos masked in control. She began to notice the small things. In one crime scene photo released to the press, a hollow figure was drawn in pen on the wall, just barely visible near the baseboard. In another, a book she remembered from Aiden's shelf was left on the floor beside a victim. These weren't coincidences. He was communicating in a language only she could understand, and that terrified her more than anything else. The package arrived without warning: no return address, no markings, just a small padded envelope sitting on Linda's porch one morning. She stood staring at it for minutes before picking it up, already knowing who it was from. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a single USB drive and a folded sheet of paper. The message was short, typed in a plain font: "Don't try to find me." She inserted the drive into her laptop, half expecting it to be blank, but it contained several video files, each labeled only with a date. She opened the first. Grainy footage played Aiden walking along a snowy sidewalk, face obscured by a hood, passing storefronts she didn't recognize. In the next, he was riding a bus through a city at night, his reflection faint in the window, staring blankly ahead. Each video was less than a minute long, no sound, just pieces of a silent journey through unfamiliar places. The final video was different. It opened with a dimly lit motel room. Aiden stood in front of the camera, face partially shadowed. His eyes, once soft and curious, were hollow, now calm but unreadable. In a slow, measured voice, he spoke to the lens. He said the world was built on illusions and noise, that people were masks and lied, and no one truly saw the ugliness beneath it all. He said he never killed out of anger, but out of necessity to disrupt the facade, to create silence in a world too loud. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't express regret. Instead, he said, he had become exactly what the world deserved. A mirror, a void. The video ended with him staring directly into the camera for nearly 30 seconds before the screen went black. Linda sat frozen. The room was silent, but her mind screamed. This wasn't a confession. It was a farewell and a warning. The FBI analyzed the footage but found no metadata, no location markers. The backgrounds were nondescript, the faces of bystanders blurred or turned away. Aiden had erased every breadcrumb. Still, every few months, another murder surfaced, different city, same method, always untraceable. Linda no longer looked for him. She just waited. Each night, she locked her doors, closed her curtains, and wondered if the next victim would be someone she knew, or if it would be her.